Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Shout out to those of you who are watching on YouTube. Check this out. This is a bonus episode. We haven't done one of these in a while, but I felt the need to give you a bonus episode because I got to salute to the champs. Got to salute to the champs at the time of this recording. The New York Knicks are the NBA champions. Shout out to the Knicks Nation. I would be the first to say that I'm surprised. Well, not really surprised, but let me just, I guess, go back a little bit before I move forward. I hate the Knicks. And it seems like for as long as I can remember, I hate the Knicks. And it's never been anything personal. I just hated the Knicks. I mean, like I grew up a Jordan fan, Bulls fan of those Chicago teams, and their arch nemesis was the Knicks. So I just grew to hate the Knicks. And so I spent a better part of my, young adulthood and teenage, well, maybe not teenage, but college years, rooting against the Knicks. And then the Knicks got sorry for a long time. And when they were bad, I mean, I really couldn't really hate because they were just trash. But they got better, obviously. And, last year you saw some glimpses in what they could be. And then this year it was just a totally different team. Now, full disclosure, I am an Atlanta Hawks fan. And, what's interesting was my Hawks actually were the only team to beat the Knicks twice in their playoff run. And we were actually up on the Knicks 2-1. And I'll be honest, and I said this to my friends, and I'll touch on them in just a second. But I said it to them, like, at no given point did I think that my Hawks were going to beat the Knicks. Even when we were up 2-1, I think I would have had to have seen them win the series and be standing on the podium with the trophy for me to believe it. And it's not that I don't believe in the Hawks, but I just knew that it's not our time yet. We're probably a couple of years away. Maybe a piece or two missing from making a title run. But that being said, man, I had to do this episode. I mentioned friends, so I will start first with the people that I'm close to who are Knicks fans. First and foremost, my dad. My dad is a huge Knicks fan. He's been a Knicks fan all my life. The Knicks, as you guys have heard probably a gazillion times, this championship in 2026 was their first since 53 years ago. So I'm 53 years old. So at the time of this recording, so the Knicks literally had not won a championship since before I was born, or the year that I was born, I should say. And so it's mind-boggling. So my dad, the same year that his favorite basketball team won a title was the same year that he became. So my dad, the same year that his favorite basketball team, the New York Knicks, became champions, was the same year that he became a father for the first time. And that was 53 years ago. And that's a long time to be waiting on your team to win. But got to shout out my dad because he is truly the definition of a long-suffering fan. I got some close friends. First and foremost, my boy Zell. Zell has been riding with the Knicks probably since, the 90s, I guess. He's always been a fan of the tough-nosed, grit and grimy type of teams that the Knicks have, trotted out there each year. And Zell obviously was a huge Georgetown fan, big fan of Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing obviously made his way to the New York Knicks in 1985. And so I'm happy for Zell. He didn't do a whole bunch of bragging, but I'll put it like this. In our group chat, there was a lot of cussing going on in just about every game, particularly game 5 when the Knicks found themselves down by, what was it? What are they down, 20 points? I think 20 points in the fourth quarter and made a comeback, one of several comebacks that they made in the series. So yeah, shout out to Zell. I got to shout out two of my other best friends, my boy Juan Cruz and my boy Mo. First up with Juan Cruz. Juan Cruz, diehard Knicks fan. Juan and I met in college at South Carolina State University. Juan is, New York through and through. Raised in the Bronx, Puerto Rican cat, lives and dies by the Knicks. And Juan and I have had talks, many, many talks, text messages. We were talking trash to each other during the series. But after they won, that was one of the first calls I made. I had to call him and my boy Mo. Mo, another, you guys have heard me mention Mo's name before on this podcast. Mo and I played ball together, South Carolina State University. One of my best friends. And interestingly enough, Mo and Juan are godfathers to two of our sons. Mo is Dion, our oldest son's godfather, and Juan is Brandon, our youngest son's godfather. Y'all ain't sent no money recently either, so y'all should send some birthday money, but that's beside the point. But yeah, these are, two of my boys and well, three if you count Zell. I mean, like, these are like day ones, and Zell and I go back to 7th grade. So it's to see them and see the joy in which, they had watching the Knicks win. I had to put all hate aside because, again, you want to see your friends and your family celebrate when their team wins. And if we're being honest, even before the Knicks won the championship, if you saw a lot of their fans on social media, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. People in Spurs uniforms were getting beat up on the streets of New York. And I will say this much, too. I don't think in my heart of heart those were Knicks fans. I think Knicks fans are probably closer to people like my dad or Zell or Mo or Juan. They're not like that. I don't necessarily know that a true fan would attack somebody for having on a Spurs jersey. That being said, I think there were a lot of people who we saw become opportunists and have the opportunity to revel and act a fool. But that being said, man, I got to salute them off the top because they are, the definition of fans I've known probably, like I said, for the better part of my life, my dad, all my life. And, just as a friend, I all I can do is salute the champs. I can't talk trash anymore. I can't, send out the gone fishing memes anymore. They're champions. I don't know, when they'll win another. They have a really, really great team. They could win next year, to be honest. But even if they don't, you can't take this title away from them. And there's no asterisk or, well, what if or anything like that. The Spurs didn't play well, but beside the fact that they didn't play well, more than anything else, the Knicks played like champions. They played like champions in each and every series, and they got better, and they got better, and they got better. Now, I have no explanation as to why the Knicks got off to such slow starts, but the true definition of a champion is somebody that doesn't quit. And we saw the Knicks get down in this series against the Spurs in the NBA Finals, and they never wilted. They never, folded. They always kept pushing and fighting. And like I said, just as a fan of basketball, I have a lot of respect for that because it's saying something if you're down 20 points in the fourth quarter. Most teams, you're going to throw in the towel. You say, okay, well, let's get ready for the next one. The Knicks were in game 5, down 20 points, and they could have easily said, okay, well, let's get ready for game 6. We're going back to New York. Let's go ahead and pack it in. But those guys never quit. Shout out to Jalen Brunson, man. I marvel at Jalen Brunson for a couple of reasons. One, he's an undersized guy. I can't call him short because he's taller than me. But at 6'1", 6'2", he's not a big guy. He's got a sturdy body, if you will. Pause. But he's a great shot maker, and he's a great difficult shot maker. And that's one of the things that's very impressive, because a lot of times some of the shots, if you look at the angles on TV in which his body is contorted, he still makes the shots, and he makes smart plays. Doesn't have a lot of turnovers, and I haven't really seen Jalen Brunson get very emotional on the court as far as like losing his cool. And there were probably a couple of times when he had every right to. Of course, we all saw the replay where Victor Wembanyama shoved him to the earth and, didn't get a technical foul called on him for that. And if we're being honest, again, shout out to the Spurs. The Spurs, they did great to get there. I think there's a level of anticipation of like, okay, well, the Spurs have to struggle. This is going to be their struggle, and they'll get back. I don't think that you can just chalk it up and say a team is going to get back to the finals. Nothing is a given in today's NBA. It's literally a year in, year out basis. And you always think you're going to get back until, your star player tears his ACL or gets caught for dogfighting or something like that, or goes to jail for selling kilos of cocaine, or, gets accused of fixing basketball games. Any and everything probably can and will happen. So while on paper, the Spurs look like they could probably be back in the finals next year or the subsequent years. But the game isn't played on paper. It's played inside of TV screens. Shout out to Kenny Mayne. But yeah, it's the thing that's impressive to me was that the Knicks never folded. They never quit. They just kept playing. And I think when you have that type of leadership, in guys like Jalen Brunson, I think it filters throughout your team. And when guys stay level-headed and stay cool, you can see the process happening. And I watched all the games with my sons, and I was telling them, I was like, this game isn't over. I've seen enough basketball to know, yeah, if you're up by 20 points in the fourth quarter in 1992, yeah, you're probably going to win. But in 2026, no, not with the advent of the 3-point shot. Also, the Spurs were doing a lot of dumb stuff. I mean, like I could do a whole another episode on how bad the Spurs played. But more than anything else, the Knicks played great basketball. And as a fan of the game, I'm just a fan of basketball, period. Outside of me being a fan of the Hawks, I love watching basketball. The Knicks played very, very well as far as the game of basketball. Defensively, they were what coaches say were on a string. Like, they were in where they were supposed to be to get the stops, to get steals, to force turnovers, to force bad shots. And they just kept plugging away. So I got to give all the credit to the Knicks. Shout out to Mike Brown. Mike Brown, outside of Mike Brown leading the chant of "Who Let the Dogs Out," Mike Brown was impeccable. I mean, like, he ran circles around the Spurs head coach, Mitch Johnson, who is a young guy, young brother, two brothers going at it. I don't think that got talked about enough, two black head coaches in the finals. But he ran circles around him. Mike Brown had a counter for everything that the Spurs tried to do. And, he and his staff did a brilliant job, particularly on the defensive end. So yeah, it doesn't get talked about enough, but Mike Brown, kudos to you, brother. You did your thing. Again, so I got to shout out the Knicks again. Got to shout out my dad, Zell, Mo, Juan Cruz. I can't forget about my girl, Krishna, Shelly Shell, huge Knicks fans. And one Knicks fan that I know he watched all of this from heaven, my man, Jeff Gambles. If you saw the episode that I did with Krishna, what was it, earlier this year, I think, on on the Rap Soul podcast. We dedicated the episode to Jeff. Shout out to the homie Jeff Gambles, who passed away earlier this calendar year. Huge Knicks fan. And I thought about Jeff when I saw the Knicks standing on the podium accepting the trophy, because I know Jeff would have been in our group chat talking trash. Or he would have been, because Jeff was known for anytime the Knicks won on Twitter, Knicks tape, hashtag Knicks tape. So he would have been at the parade. He would have been, he would have been there. So I know he is smiling down from heaven. As he would always say on his page, blue and orange skies. So shout out to not only Jeff, but all Knicks fans. So in talking about the Knicks and watching their rise and their playoff run, and then the subsequent, fandom, and how, the city of New York was engulfed in the spirit of the Knicks, and watching, I saw a little bit of their parade, and it just, New Yorkers, generally, not all, but generally are thought of as unhappy people. Right. And so to see that level of happiness and love, I'm not going to say crimes weren't happening, but it does something when a team wins for their city, wins a title. But it also got me to thinking, there are some teams that have never won a title. And you see the title of this episode, Everybody Loves a Winner. And I truly believe that. And so in New York City and the tri-state area of New Jersey, Connecticut, there were people that probably jumped on the bandwagon who were happy to see them win, but they probably couldn't tell you who Mitchell Robinson was, or they probably know Jalen Brunson, but they couldn't point out Miles Bridges in a lineup. That being said, but it got me to thinking about some of the teams that have never been to the mountaintop. And the list, while it isn't long, it is a very interesting list. Let's start with the NFL. These teams have never been to a Super Bowl. The Cleveland Browns, the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Never been to a Super Bowl ever. And now separately, there's a list of teams who've never won a Super Bowl. Obviously, it would be those teams that I just named, along with the Buffalo Bills, the Minnesota Vikings, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Atlanta Falcons, 28-3, the Carolina Panthers, the Arizona Cardinals, the Tennessee Titans. And so that's it. Those teams have never won a Super Bowl. And I think if you're a fan of any of those teams, you want to see your team, hold up that trophy and stand on that podium and have the confetti come down on them. Several of those teams that I mentioned played for a Super Bowl but didn't win one. And then you go over to Major League Baseball. With Major League Baseball, the San Diego Padres, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Milwaukee Brewers, the Colorado Rockies, and the Seattle Mariners have never won a World Series. In fact, the Seattle Mariners have never even played for a World Series. That's crazy when you think about it, when you think about some of the great players that they had, like Ken Griffey Jr. But the Mariners have never made it. And I'm sure that, the good folks in Seattle would love to see the Mariners win a title someday. Hopefully they don't have to wait 53 years for it to happen, but they'd like to see it happen. Now, conversely, when you move to the NBA, there are several teams that did not play for a NBA Finals. One would be the LA Clippers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Memphis Grizzlies, as well as the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, what was interesting was when I saw that list, I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't ever recall the Hawks playing for an NBA Finals. So I did a quick Google search, and When you know it, the Hawks did play for a NBA Finals, but it was when they were in St. Louis in the 50s. Personally, I don't count that, so the Hawks never made it. But teams that have never won an NBA Finals, Phoenix, Utah, Orlando, Indiana, Charlotte, LA Clippers, Memphis, Minnesota, New Orleans, and Brooklyn. And so it's interesting because, again, as a fan, you want to see your team make it to the mountaintop. The running joke is that I haven't seen the Hawks play for a NBA Finals. I'd like to see that happen sometime before I check up out of here. And the reality is the player that's probably going to lead the Hawks to the promised land, he's probably in middle school right now. So it's going to be a few years, right? But for as great of the players that we've seen in this era and the previous eras, you just don't grow Kobe Bryant's on trees. You don't make LeBron James in a lab. You don't create Steph Curry's. They happen over time. And I tell people all the time, like the Golden State Warriors, prior to the run that they had with, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, when I was coming up, they had a pretty good squad with the Run TMC guys. That was Mitch Richmond, Tim Hardaway, and what's the white guy's name? Chris Mullin. But that was it. And then they had another team like in the mid 2000s that was pretty good. They had a little playoff run, but for the most part, the Warriors weren't a good team when I was coming up. The Cleveland Cavaliers, same thing. Before landing LeBron James, they were kind of like almost, they were almost team. Like you almost were good enough. You almost were good enough to beat the Bulls. You almost were good enough to beat the Pistons, but you weren't. You were in the same division as the Pistons and the Bulls in the 80s and 90s, and they dominated. They ran roughshod over that division and subsequently the Eastern Conference. And you couldn't beat Boston and you couldn't beat the Hawks. So it just never happened. But they draft a guy out of high school named LeBron James, and the rest is history. He leaves and comes back and beats the 73-9 Golden State Warriors. So things can happen. And I'm not here to tell you to lose faith if you're in Jacksonville or if you're a Seattle Mariners fan, because everybody loves a winner. We all want to see our teams win. I personally, again, I would love to see, my Atlanta Hawks have a ticker tape parade down Peachtree Street, all the way to Magic City because it begins and ends at Magic City, right? That being said, there's hope. I mean, at some point, the Cubs won a World Series. At some point, the dreaded Boston Red Sox won a title, right? And I say that as a Yankees fan. I'm a Yankees fan, so I know what it's like to win. I've seen my team win. And honestly, all hate aside, I think most fans want to see that in their lifetime. And so in closing, I want to see every fan base get a chance to feel and experience what we saw the Knicks fans do this past summer, because I think it's important that the fans at least get the feeling. Is there going to be heartbreak along the way? Yeah, of course there is. Go ask the Buffalo Bills fans. They've suffered heartbreak like no other. But I got a lot of love and respect for Buffalo Bills fans because they keep coming back. They keep coming back each year, and they are out there in the elements, in the cold, supporting that team. And, they've got a legitimate shot to win it this year. They've had legitimate shots to win it every other year. But, there's only one winner each year, right? And so, keep hope alive. At some point, your team is going to win. I mean, it took the Knicks 53 years to do it. And at this point, to the fans, to people like my dad, to people like Zell and Mo and Juan, it matters, but it doesn't matter because they won. And so the thing that you always got to remember about champions is they're always champion, no matter what. Like Jalen Brunson, the rest of that Knicks crew, they will always be loved and revered in New York City. I mean, just look at how much love and reverence was poured into the former Knicks who were going to all the games, like Patrick Ewing and Allen Houston and John Starks and Stephon Marbury. Those guys are treated like kings, and they didn't even win. Excuse me. They won. They never won a title. Let me be clear. And so what's going to happen 20 years from now? Maybe the Knicks win again. Maybe they don't. But Jalen Brunson and this squad right here, they will always be known as champions. And you can never disrespect the champion, and you can never take it away because they did it the old-fashioned way. They earned it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday. This is a bonus episode, so this one's out on Sunday. Make sure that you check out the website. The website is the 12 Kyle podcast.riverside.com. Go there, subscribe to the newsletter. That way you get updates only on the episodes. I promise you, you won't be spammed. That's going to do it for me, folks. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.